Imagine, just for a moment, a place defined entirely by extremes. You're standing in a town that boasts both some of the hottest, most blistering summers, and at the same time, the absolute driest year on record.
Yeah, a place where historically the rivers were literally paved with gold.
Exactly, sparking this frantic rush of humanity. But then you look at it today, and the residents are out there battling literal plagues of rabbits and winter skies that are just choked with wood smoke.
It's a total geographic anomaly. The environmental and historical dials are just constantly turned up to 11.
They really are. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a single, just wildly fascinating source today, which is the comprehensive Wikipedia article on Alexandra, New Zealand.
And our mission for you today isn't just to, read off a map or give you a dry history lesson.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
We want to uncover how a community survives, how it adapts, and how it actually thrives when both nature and history are constantly throwing the wildest curveballs imaginable their way.
Because the story of Alexandra is, well, it's really a masterclass in human adaptation. It shows us what happens when people are pushed right up against the edge of what an environment will tolerate.
And they just decide to dig their heels in anyway.
Exactly.
So let's set the scene for you. Geographically, Alexandra is this small urban area nestled in the central Otago district of New Zealand's South Island. It sits right inland at the confluence of the Clutha and Manihurikia rivers.
And as of June 2025, it's home to roughly 5,860 people. So it's a pretty tight-knit community.
Very tight-knit. But to understand the Alexandra of today, we have to rewind to the ultimate extreme event that birthed this town in the first place, which is the 1860s Otago Gold Rush.
Oh, the sheer chaos of this period. I mean, it laid the foundation for everything that followed. The landscape was suddenly overrun because of a discovery made by two miners, Horatio Hartley and Christopher Riley.
Right, and these two had actually met over in the United States during the California Gold Rush. They traveled to New Zealand, and in 1862, they found themselves in the Cromwell Gorge.
And the source notes that over just 2 months, working in absolute secrecy, they pulled 34 kilograms of gold out of the gorge.
Which is, that begs the question, right? How do you pull that much gold out of the earth without anyone noticing?
Well, you have to operate in incredibly remote, rugged terrain and keep a remarkably low profile. They were panning in this massive, treacherous river system where the sheer scale of the wilderness kind of hid them.
Yeah, but they couldn't keep it a secret forever.
No, mainly because the colonial government had essentially put a bounty on the land. There was this lucrative reward on offer for new, viable goldfield discoveries to stimulate the economy.
So they had to cash in.
Right. To claim that reward, Hartley and Riley had to declare their find in Dunedin, and the moment they went public, the floodgates just opened.
Yeah, within an incredible short time frame, 2,000 miners descended on what would eventually become Alexandra, and the conditions they found were brutally uninviting.
Oh, absolutely brutal.
There was a lack of food, a lack of equipment, and virtually no wood for building or fires. It was just desperate men facing down the elements in a rocky basin.
And the demographics of this rush were highly complex, too.
Yeah.
Up to 50% of these early miners were of Chinese origin, mostly Cantonese.
Wow, 50%.
Yeah, and their approach to the environment was fundamentally different from the European miners. While many European prospectors rushed in, grabbed the easy surface gold, and then just quickly abandoned their claims when the extraction got difficult.
The Chinese miners did something else.
Yeah, they utilized highly organized, cooperative syndicates. They worked methodically to rework the abandoned tailings and riverbeds, using collective labor to extract wealth that the more individualistic miners had just entirely missed.
That is so smart. But regardless of their methods, the danger was just absolute. The Clutha River is massive and powerful. The source notes that in the year 1863 alone, 37 men drowned in the river or its tributaries.
And out of those 37 men, 12 could not even be named.
That's heartbreaking.
They were just swallowed by the currents, remaining completely anonymous casualties of this frantic rush for wealth.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because once the easy gold in the river ran out, the town didn't just pack up and leave, they escalated their technology.
They definitely escalated.
They moved into what was called paddock dredging. So imagine a floating, multi-story factory operating as a giant river vacuum. From 1896 to 1924, and then again in the 1950s and 60s, these massive dredges utilized a continuous loop of heavy steel buckets.
Right, and these buckets would literally scrape the bedrock of the river, pull up tons of gravel, wash it through heavy machinery on board to extract the gold, and then just dump the massive rocks out the back.
Yeah, and they produced this constant deafening noise and huge clouds of dust that plagued the town day and night. But the most staggering detail is how this physical destruction interacted with the town's infrastructure.
Yeah, the mechanical strain of those dredges was so immense that it actually affected the power grid.
Wait, really? The power grid?
Yeah. When those heavy steel buckets hit particularly hard schist rock under the riverbed, the electric motors had to draw a massive surge of current to keep the bucket line moving.
Oh my God.
And that sudden, massive electrical draw would pull so much voltage from the local grid that the lights of the entire town of Alexandra would physically dim.
So you literally had the town's electricity pulsing to the rhythm of this violent destruction of the river.
What's fascinating here is the sheer, unbelievable scale of the extraction that caused that strain. To give you an idea of the reward driving this destruction, a single gold dredge named the Lady Mullineux captured 12,234 ounces of gold in just 1 week.
That is, I can't even wrap my head around that.
Right. That level of resource extraction permanently altered the physical shape of the river. But as much as they were fighting the water and the bedrock, the miners quickly discovered that their greatest adversary wasn't the river itself.
No, it was the atmospheric bowl they were standing in. The dredging physically reshaped the river, but the geography of the basin dictated everything else.
It really did.
Let's talk about the extreme climate of Alexandra, because this is not a typical breezy New Zealand coastal town. This place is an inland trap. Summer temperatures have been recorded hitting 38.7 degrees Celsius.
Which is incredibly hot for that region.
Right. But then winter lows drop down to negative 11.8 degrees Celsius.
It basically borders on a semi-arid climate, being one of the furthest towns from the ocean in the entire country. The surrounding mountain ranges strip the moisture from the weather systems before they ever reach the valley floor.
And Alexandra actually holds the national record for the lowest rainfall in a single calendar year. In 1964, they received just 212 millimeters of rain for the entire year.
That intense lack of moisture, combined with the ring of hills, creates a highly specific atmospheric dynamic.
Now, hold on. Let me push back on this for a second. Because if you're listening to this, you hear dry, sunny town, and you probably think it sounds like an ideal getaway.
Sure, it sounds perfect on paper.
Exactly. And sure, we hear about the town having a smog issue in the winter, but Alexandra has fewer than 6,000 people. Are you telling me that a few thousand residential fireplaces burning wood can genuinely create a pollution problem that rivals the industrial smog of a major city? How does a tiny rural town compete with urban centers packed with millions of cars?
It sounds counterintuitive, but it all comes down to the physics of temperature inversions. In a major city, wind and rising heat usually disperse pollution into the upper atmosphere.
Right, it just blows away.
Exactly. But in winter, Alexandra experiences high-pressure weather systems that create descending air. Because the town sits in a geographic bowl, that cold, dense air sinks to the valley floor and gets trapped by the warmer air above it. It acts like a literal physical lid.
So the lack of wind becomes a structural feature of the environment.
Precisely. The wind stops entirely. The temperatures remain below freezing all day. So naturally, the residents fire up their wood and coal burners to stay warm.
Yeah, you have to.
Right. But the PM10 particulates that microscopic soot from the fires. They're pumped out of the chimneys, they hit that invisible atmospheric lid, and they stop. They have nowhere to go.
Oh, wow. So it just builds up.
The smoke simply accumulates, day after day, under the inversion layer. The result is that this picturesque rural town regularly exceeds national air quality guidelines from May through August, experiencing some of the worst winter air pollution in the country.
But the community hasn't just resigned itself to breathing soot, right? The source highlights a brilliant initiative from 2018 where local primary school kids from Alexandra teamed up with scientists from NIWA to study this exact problem.
Yeah, that was incredible.
These kids didn't just read static sensors, they literally strapped air quality monitors to their bikes and physically mapped the town. They spent 4 months tracking how the cold air pooling in slight geographical dips concentrated the pollution block by block.
It demonstrates a community that is deeply invested in the granular mechanics of its own environment. When your town is a basin that traps extreme heat, extreme cold, and your own fireplace smoke, you really have no choice but to study it and adapt.
And adaptation is forced upon them economically, too, because how do you sustain a town in a dry dirt bowl once the easy gold is gone?
You pivot to agriculture.
Exactly. Though, of course, farming in a semi-arid basin brings a whole new set of chaotic variables.
The shift from gold to agriculture required a complete reimagining of the landscape. By the late 1880s, the focus shifted to stone fruit orchards.
Peaches, plums, apples, apricots, cherries. The town celebrates this successful pivot every spring with the Alexandra Blossom Festival, which has been running since 1957.
And they also figured out how to cultivate grapes in this extreme climate, leveraging the intense summer heat.
Yeah, Alexandra boasts some of the world's most southern vineyards, famous for producing highly sought-after Pinot Noir despite the constant threat of devastating late frosts.
But the earliest and perhaps most ambitious agricultural gamble was pastoral farming. In 1861, two brothers from Scotland, Watson and Alexander Shannon, established the Galloway Station.
And to survive the harsh terrain, they needed livestock engineered for extremes. So they imported 15 merino rams and 27 merino ewes directly from the King of Prussia's stud.
And that was not cheap.
No. The source notes the cost for this importation was £2,000 in 1861. That was a massive fortune to gamble on sheep.
Huge gamble.
But the mechanism behind the gamble was sound. Merino sheep have incredibly dense fleeces, perfectly adapted to survive those bitter negative 11-degree winters, and they thrive on sparse, dryland vegetation. It paid off, and merino farming became a regional staple.
But attempting to engineer an ecosystem as fragile as Central Otago often triggers cascading unintended consequences.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because in 1866, an organization called the Acclimatization Society of Otago introduced 60 rabbits into the area.
Just 60 rabbits.
Right. And their logic was to provide familiar sport hunting and a food source for the settlers, essentially trying to replicate the feeling of an English country estate.
Which demonstrates a profound misunderstanding of the local ecology. I mean, the dry, easily burrowed soils of Central Otago were a perfect incubator.
Within just 5 years, those 60 rabbits had triggered a biological explosion. By 1871, they were a full-blown plague.
It's astonishing how fast that happened.
Rabbits are induced ovulators with incredibly short gestation periods, meaning their population mathematics are just exponential. The source notes they were eating the hard-won pasture land completely bare, threatening the very pastoral farming the town was trying to build.
So the town's response was to declare war on the species. This gave rise to the Great Easter Bunny Hunt, run by the local Lions Club since the early 1990s.
Which is quite the event.
Oh, yeah. Every Easter, locals compete in a massive community-wide culling event to shoot as many rabbits as physically possible.
But you cannot simply shoot your way out of exponential math. The source highlights a fascinating twist in this conflict. In 2018, the hunt was actually canceled by the regional council.
They decided to try something new.
Yeah, they decided to implement a targeted ecosystem intervention, introducing a rabbit virus known as RHDV1K5. Think of it like deploying a biological software patch designed to cleanly delete a pest from the system.
But the patch failed. The virus didn't have the desired impact at all.
Wait, why did it fail? How does a targeted virus just not work on a massive, dense population of pests?
Well, it comes down to viral ecology.
Mm-hmm.
Wild rabbit populations often carry pre-existing benign caliciviruses.
Okay.
And these benign strains act almost like a natural vaccine, conferring a level of immunity across the population against the lethal, introduced strains. Combine that localized immunity with the sheer reproductive rate of the survivors, and the population instantly backfills any losses.
That is wild.
The source bluntly states that after the virus attempt, there were actually more rabbits around than ever.
So the town reviewed it to blunt force. In 2021, the hunters went back out and shot over 10,000 rabbits in a single event. And the experts reviewed the data and concluded that removing 10,000 rabbits still didn't significantly dent the overall population. The reproductive math of the rabbits simply outpaces human intervention.
It perfectly encapsulates the tension of living in Alexandra. The community constantly pushes back against nature to carve out a living, and nature constantly pushes back with overwhelming force.
Living through those relentless cycles, weathering 1878 floods that turned the valley into an inland sea, enduring booming gold rushes and devastating busts, and fighting endless plagues of rabbits, it shapes the psychology of a town.
It really breeds a specific, stubborn kind of community spirit.
Yes, you can see this fierce desire to preserve their home on their own terms reflected in their local landmarks.
The physical infrastructure of the town absolutely tells the story of that stubborn resilience. The shaky bridge is a perfect example.
It was built in 1879 as a 60-meter-long suspension bridge to cross the Manahurkia River. But by 1906, it was rendered completely obsolete by a newer road and rail bridge.
And usually, a town will tear down obsolete infrastructure or just let it collapse into the river.
Right. It even earned the nickname Shaky Bridge because the decking fell into such severe disrepair, but the locals refused to let it die. A group called the Pioneer Bridge Committee rallied, raised the necessary funds, and meticulously saved it. Today, it stands as a beloved pedestrian tourist attraction.
And we see that same fiercely protective spirit directed toward the native ecology, too. We discussed the devastation caused by introduced rabbits, but the community is actively engineering spaces to restore the original biological balance.
Right, the sanctuary.
Yes. In 2005, residents formed an ecological trust and built the Mokomoko Dryland Sanctuary. They constructed a massive 1.6-kilometer-long predator-proof fence to enclose 14 hectares of land.
They built an absolute fortress, and they built it specifically to protect native dryland species like the giant Otago skink.
Which is a massive lizard.
Yeah. This is a reptile that can grow up to 300 millimeters long. The ecology of the basin is the only place these skinks can survive. They rely entirely on the specific schist rock formations that absorb the intense summer heat.
And the fence serves as a permanent barrier against the mammalian predators that were introduced alongside the rabbits.
It requires a massive commitment to understand and protect the granular, specific needs of a localized ecosystem. So what does this all mean? How do you sum up the personality of a town that coordinates primary school smog studies, builds heavily fortified enclosures for giant lizards, and wages an unwinnable war against rabbits?
That's a lot to take in.
I think the definitive answer lies in the story of the Alexandra clock.
Oh, that is a remarkable piece of civic history.
In 1968, the local Jaycees Club decided they wanted to build a giant clock on a hill overlooking the town. They raised about $3,000 and poured in countless hours of volunteer labor.
The engineering of this thing is massive, too. I mean, it's 11 meters in diameter, featuring a minute hand that is 5.6 meters long.
Yeah, and it's illuminated by 150 LED lights, casting a glow over the entire basin at night. It is the ultimate symbol of civic pride.
A literal beacon of their permanence in the valley.
Wait, let me give you the best detail from the source. In April 2020, this massive, beloved civic timepiece suddenly stopped working. It wasn't an electrical failure or a storm. It broke because someone decided to physically swing on the giant metal hands of the clock.
You're kidding.
No. The joyrider broke the mechanical drive, freezing time over the entire town of Alexandra at exactly 8.34.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, all of these quirks, a wobbly suspension bridge, lovingly restored, a 14-hectare fortress built for skinks, a giant glowing clock on a hill broken by a joyrider, they paint a picture of a community that is deeply and sometimes chaotically entangled with its surroundings.
That's exactly it.
They take immense active pride in their environment, even when that environment is fiercely unforgiving.
It really is a masterclass in human adaptation. From the 1860s miners desperately dredging the Clutha River and dimming the town's lights in their pursuit of gold, to modern kids tracking the physics of winter smog, to the endless mathematics of the Easter Bunny hunt.
That's all connected.
Yeah, Alexandra is a town defined entirely by its ability to weather extremes with a combination of stubbornness and ingenuity.
And exploring this history leaves us with a fascinating paradox about how our relationship with the land evolves over time. Early in our discussion, we unpacked the mechanics of paddock dredging. You know, the loud, dusty, violent churning of the riverbed to extract wealth.
Which was, by any modern standard, an environmental catastrophe.
It left massive, rocky scars all over the valley floor.
It did.
Yet today, the tilings from that dredging the sprawling fields of discarded rocks and churned up earth, they cover 170 hectares. But they're no longer viewed as a catastrophe.
Right.
They're legally protected as a historic reserve, known as the Earnsclewed Dredge Tailings. The mechanisms of destruction have aged into protected heritage.
We literally took the very industrial mess that dimmed the town's lights, put a physical fence around it, and decided it was sacred history.
Which raises a profound question to leave you with today as you go about your week. Look around at the massive industrial scars, the digital waste, or the environmental tailings we are creating right now in our own modern rushes for wealth and progress. Which of our current chaotic messes will future generations put a fence around, label as historic, and fiercely decide to protect?
An amazing question to chew on. From the town with the hottest summers, the driest years, and a clock forever stuck at 8.34, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.